Okay, so in this series of videos, or video shorts, that we're going to put together in one long video, I guess, we're going to be putting together a Revolve feature. It's going to be the Revolved Boss space. So we're going to do a Revolved Boss space thin feature, like with the wine glass. Then we're going to do a Revolved Boss space as a solid feature. We're going to do that in the inside in order to plug that hole. It's kind of a hole that's going to develop in that. But for the fun of it, I'm just going to get right to the end and show you how to do PhotoView 360, because this is really kind of fun. What we're going to do first is we're going to come in here into appearances. We're going to go into scenes. So we're going to take appearances off, go into scenes, go into basic scenes. We're going to get something a little bit better than 3-point faded. So let's see what we can do. Let's see. Let's get the backdrop studio. We're going to see what that does. Kind of changes that a little bit. And we're going to go down here. We're going to go to camera. We're going to go to camera view, or open that up. Make sure we're in camera view. So we're going to go to show camera. Not a show camera, but we want to make sure we have camera views. So right down here, this is what we want to select. So now we're in a camera view, and now we're going to do PhotoView 360. We're going to do final render, and we're going to see what that looks like. So what PhotoView 360 is doing is taking a model that we set up with the parameters that we have, including the scenery in the background and the type of material that we have in here, which is glass. And I put a blue color in that glass, so it's going to render that too. And it's kind of working in the background now, but there will be a window that's going to pop up. There's going to be a preview window that's going to pop up with this, and a final render window too. So sometimes it takes a while, especially if you get started. So here's PhotoView 360. It's going to get started. And yeah, then we have our final render in the background. So this is the preview window. Preview window is going to fill in first, but you can turn off PhotoView 360 and have that preview window like appear, and it's going to give you a pixelated version of what you're likely going to get like in PhotoView 360. So now you can see it processing. So I have 8 cores in here, so each one of these dots is a core, and it's rendering. So it takes a little bit more time to render on the image itself, but in the end you get a PNG file. You can save it whatever file format you like, within reason. A JPEG file. It's got lights on it. It's there's certain reflexivity and material qualities with the glass that we chose, and the color in there, and it produces a photoreal image. So let's back up a couple steps. We're going to get out of our display manager over here. We're going to go to camera. We're going to unclick that camera. So that's going to get us back to SolidWorks. You can't do any model editing if you're in a camera view. So we're going to go all the way back here to our feature manager and take a look at what we just did. So if we go into our sketch 1 and open that up and take a look at that, we're going to go normal to it. And you can see it. It's really kind of complicated, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to delete our feature. I'm going to go ahead and put in this bottom section in here, kind of show you how I put this together, because it really isn't all that complicated. But there is kind of a fun element in here too. We have a style spline that we're going to put in here that's going to help drive the top part of our model. So let's go ahead and rebuild that. Revolve thin. Let's go ahead and delete that. So we're going to get rid of that portion of our model. We're still going to keep our blue color in here. We're going to keep our glass material, but let's go ahead and change our scene in here. So if you go over here to our task bar over here on the right hand side, go to appearances, scenes, and decals. We're going to go to scenes in here. We're going to go back to our basic scenes. We're going to scroll back up and put in the appropriate scheme that we're used to, which is a 3-point fade. And all you have to do is drag that in here, and same with the material too. And I'll show you how to do that when you want to get material quality onto that object. For instance, we chose brass for our hinge plate, but we could do all sorts of different brass appearances to it. We could do a polished brass, we could do a kind of a brush brass look to it, and add different colors to it too. So a lot of different options in here other than what the default values are set for the materials that you choose. So we're going to go to sketch 1. We're going to right click on that, and yeah, sometimes these turn blue. If you get rid of the feature, these look like they're the dimension colors you typically see with a feature. But we're going to go ahead and delete this style spline. I'm going to right click on it, and we're just going to go ahead and delete it and try to make this a little bit simpler. Yeah, so now that dimension in the bottom turned black, which is what we want. So what I did is I went in and measured a wine glass, measured the top of the wine glass, which is almost 3 inches, 2 7/8 of an inch. And then between the top and the bottom, from the bottom of the glass up to this point up here approximately, is when the glass begins to flute out, when it begins to bulge out here to contain the tasty wine that you might want to drink a little bit later, since it's Saturday. And then below that we have the width of the wine glass, which is 2.75. And then I just put in these dimensions. I dimension it to that center line. So all my dimensions in here are going to have an angle, and then they're going to have a distance to the center. And of course I went over the center and put in, as you remember with that sketch video a little while back, if you click on the center you have a choice. If you go in this side of the center, it'll give you a radius dimension. If you go on the other side, it'll give you a diameter dimension. With the expectation you're going to go ahead and revolve that or do a mirror over here. So everything was done to that center line, that vertical center line. Then after that we have a half-inch fillet. Another 20-degree angle on that. Another half-inch fillet. So there's that fillet. It appears in 3 places. That's the second place. And then over here I put in a center line. I made that center line tangent and midpoint to this really long arc up here. I never defined the arc. I never put a radius dimension on that arc, but it's defined by this center line at that tangent and midpoint relationship, and it's vertical. And then I made that center line 2/10 of an inch from the center line in here. So this center line for the center line of the part is going to be 2/10 of an inch wide. So the reason for that is I want to make sure that that's going to be, the minimum diameter of our wine glass. We don't want it to get any thinner than that. So when we do our wine glass, we're going to do a thin extrude. We're going to go ahead and use these lines that we have in here, these lines and arcs, and we're going to extrude the thin feature. If you remember the thin feature video, we're going to do that on one side rather than mid-plane or on the other side. Then after that, we're going to go ahead and put a style spline. So this is the bottom part of the glass, defined by that 3-inch dimension, 2.75 inches on the bottom, and then with all these various lines and arcs in place. If you remember the arc and line video that I created, go ahead and look at that. And this time it's driven by angles and distant dimensions. Okay, so now that we have this all fully defined, now we're going to do something completely new and freeform, really kind of cool. We're going to do what they call a style spline, which is fairly easy to define. And it's going to be defined by about 4, 5, 6 points in here. We're going to go from that point over here to the top of our, the bottom part of the wine glass, the handle portion of that. We're going to go all the way up to the top of over here at the end point of that 2.875 inch center line on top. That's going to define the very top of the glass and the width of the top of the glass too. So if you look at wine glasses, typically it kind of comes out a little bit of a bulge over here, and then it's kind of comes down fairly sharply, and it has a couple sharp curves down here. So we're going to keep that in mind when we go to the style spline. So what you want to do is go to the sketch tab up here, go to spline, and we're going to go ahead and choose that second middle item up here called the style spline. We're going to start with this point, try not to pick up a tangent relationship, and we're just going to click points. Now it's going to define, it's going to create a curve in here, but that point's going to help drive that curve. So we're going to put one over here, one over here, one over here, and put in that bulge over here, and then kind of come back over here and then finish up there. Once you get done up there, so going to the next point, just do escape and it takes you out of there. So these are the points that help drive that style spline. So if it's a little bit too bulgy over here, take this point over here, drag that in, take that point, drag it in a little bit. If you want to have a little bit more of a cup in the bottom, maybe drag these down a little bit. Drag this one over perhaps. We're going to kind of try to keep that somewhat close to being tangent. So we want to try to keep that in place. Now if we had to, we could always take these points and drag those down over here too, get them close. If you want to add a point, right click on it, go down here to insert control vertex, and just put that on your line, and that gives you something else you can continue to make modifications to. But I think we could probably do that with less points in here. So let's just stick with the points that we have, because we'd have to end up dimensioning all these anyways. So once you kind of have that looking the way you like it, let's go ahead and define this a little bit better. Let's go ahead and take this line, this spline over here, and that one we're going to make that tangent. When you do that, it kind of limits some of the movable capabilities of some of these points in here. So these last two on the top don't get to move. So you want to make sure before you put in that tangent relationship down here, you kind of have the top of the wine glass looking the way you like. If you don't like it, take out that tangent relationship and make modifications to it. So now we're going to go ahead and define this. So you'll notice with the style splines we have a point dimension from and an angular dimension we can add to these lines in here. So let's just start doing that. So we'll start with this line over here. We'll put an angle dimension in there. And we're going to try to get close to what they had in there. 6 might be a little bit too much. Maybe 5.5 might work a little bit better. Oh, doesn't like that either. So let's do this. Let's put that in last, because I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to over-define that tangent relationship, and we don't want to do that. So let's go to the next one. We do want to put a dimension between that line and that point and center line. So let's make that 0.4. So this one we're going to make that an angle, kind of going off in a different direction, maybe 105. We're just putting in dimensions that are going to be relatively close to what's already there. So we're going to make this 1.8. Dimension in here between that and the angle, we're going to make that maybe 37. Just doing some rounding here. Between that point and that line that's already chosen for us, 3.2. And so on and so forth until we get up to the top. So between those two, gosh, just being intuitive here, it knows what we want to do. And between that point and the center line over here, 3.8 maybe. Bring that in a little bit. And the same thing over here between that point and this one. We're going to make that over the center. You want to make sure all these go over the center. We're going to make that 3.5. And lastly, hopefully this works. We put in that dimension. It makes it all black. So we're going to make that 8.8. Okay, it looks like everything's fully defined with our dimensions, angle dimensions, distance dimensions, and our sketch relations in here. We know it's fully defined over here too, because we don't see a minus sign in our sketch number 1. So it looks like we're ready for our Revolved Boss Space thin feature. Alrighty, let's revolve this guy. So if we go up here to features, now that we have our sketch in place, we're going to go to Revolved Boss Space. We don't have a whole lot of choices up here. But if we go to Revolved Boss Space, the first thing it's going to ask us for if we want to close the sketch. So I don't think we want to close the sketch. What it's going to do, if it closes the sketch, it's going to take a line from that point over here to the center line, and the same thing up here, and just give us a solid. So we're going to say no. What we want to do is we just want to revolve it about this center line, using that as our thin extrude. So we're going to say no up here. A lot of times you're going to say yes. So now that we said no, it's automatically going to think that, well, we need a thin feature. So we're going to do one direction on that. But the first thing you want to do on your Properties Manager is go to that selection box up here, Axis of Revolution, because there are a lot of center lines in here. We're going to go ahead and choose this guy. And now you can see the yellow preview, which is pretty cool. And we're going to go down here to the thin feature portion of that Revolved Boss Space instead of the 1/10 of an inch, which is okay. That's what we want. What we really want to do is we want to come down here. We want to make sure it goes in the right direction. So if we want to maintain that for the neck in here, that 2/10 of an inch dimension in here, we want to make sure it at least goes off in that direction. We can make it go in the other direction too, and it makes it really thin. But if we do that, it's going to go on the bottom here. And I think if we went off in the other direction down here, we probably didn't have this defined as well as we could have. You probably could have been put a 0.4 in that, maybe had this offset up here to a 1/10 of an inch. But if we were to go to the other direction on one direction up here, you'll notice that we no longer get that preview, and we have that center line highlighting green up here. So that's not quite going to work. So what it's going to do is it's going to go all the way down to that line, and it's going to thin down to that, and it's not going to work for us. So we want to go off in the other direction. Another choice in here is midplane. So what it's going to do is it's going to split it. So if you look at the point down here, it's going to put just as much material on one side of that thin extrude, one side of that line as it's going to on the other. And then it's going to split the difference here. So it's going to be 0.3 inches wide as opposed to 0.4 the other way. But let's go to one direction. Let's go ahead and extrude that out. And let's go see what we have. So if we go to the green check mark, now we have that in place. So here's an example after we did our Revolve Thin, is that we put a lot of effort and work into our sketch, and the feature actually took only a couple seconds to put together. So it's one of the situations like in your final project that you might think about. You might, like if you're designing a wheel or something that's going to have a lot of detail, you might spend a whole lot of time in your sketch to get that thing right. You can only, not spend a whole lot of time in a feature. It goes back and forth. And of course, with your final project, you're going to have you're not only going to be evaluated on your sketch complexity, but your feature complexity and how many parts you have in your assembly. So if you're really heavy in one thing and light in the other, that's a way to make up for that. But let's go ahead and look at this. If we were to look down that wine glass and take a look at the bottom, you can see, if we were to get rid of all those sketches, that we actually have a hole in here. So it's kind of a trick wine glass, but if we want to correct that, I think we probably do. Let's go ahead and fix that right now. So let's take a Revolve thin and let's go ahead and suppress that. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't suppress our sketch. Let's go to our front plane. We started on the front plane. Let's go ahead and make that normal too. And let's go ahead and start a new sketch. We're going to go to the front plane. Go to Sketch, go to the Sketch button over here, and here's a new tool called Convert Entities. We're going to convert some entities that we've already sketched in place. So we're going to go ahead and click on this style spline. It's going to select everything if we have the Select Chain button over here check marked. So we're going to do that. In the loops, one by one, we're probably not going to do that, and we'll save that selection explanation here in another video. But let's go ahead and select in that style spline. It's going to select everything that goes with that, and we're going to go to the green check mark. So what we want to do is we want to close the hole, and we're going to do that with another Revolve feature. So we're going to take an arc and go from this line tangent to that arc over here, that spline, and put it onto that center line. And we're going to make the center of that arc right on that center line, so it's going to have a nice smooth transition up here. Then we're going to do something very similar down here, probably take it from this arc, another 3-point arc over here, plant it on that line so it kind of looks like a smooth transition down here too. So let's do this. Let's go to the 3-point arc. As long as we're down here, let's go and put that down here. Put that arc in place. Let's take that arc and this arc. We're going to make that tangent to each other. And the center point of that arc, which is right here, we're going to make that and that, we're going to make that coincident. So it isn't fully defined. Let's see what we need to do to kind of define that a little bit. So we can probably put a dimension in that if you want to do that. Maybe between that point and that line in here, maybe 0.4, kind of round that up a little bit. So that'll take care of the bottom. And now we can probably trim out some of this stuff. We don't need this extra stuff down here. Remember, we're borrowing the sketch that's in the background. We're just trying to make a profile here that we could do another Revolved Boss base on. So we're going to do something very similar up here. 3-point arc. Click on that spline. We're going to take that over here and kind of put that roughly into, the orientation that we like. Center point of that arc and that vertical line, we're going to make that coincident. And now we need to define this a little bit better. So maybe a dimension on that. Oh, we do need to make these tangent too. So we're going to click those two with the Control key and make that tangent. Now let's maybe put a dimension between that point and that center line. We'll round that maybe 0.45. So now we're going to get a smooth transition down here, and now we're going to cut out everything that's on top of that. And now you get to see that. So now we need to put in a center line in order to do that Revolved Boss space. Go between the origin, kind of put that up there arbitrarily. And now we're going to go to Revolved Boss space and go to Features. It's automatically going to assume that we're going to select that center line in there, even though we didn't do that. It's the only center line in our sketch, so it's going to automatically select that, and it selects it green here too. So here's our dialog box. Sketch is currently open. A non-thin revolution feature requires a closed sketch. What it's going to do is it's going to put a line between a model line, not a center line, but a model line between that point there and this point down here. So we're going to say yes. It's going to put that line in place. It's going to give us a preview of what we're going to get. And then we're going to go to the green check mark. And we could say merge result, which probably is a good idea, but it's going to go ahead and merge it with the previous feature that we have. Green check mark. And now we have that in place. Okay, so we just created a Revolve 1. Maybe we can call that something a little bit more descriptive. Let's go ahead and call that our hole fill. Let's make sure we put in the proper capitalization in there. And we'll just call that, Revolve base maybe. So now that we have it in our place, if you remember a hole fill, we merged it with the Revolve base, but I don't think it really did. So if you were to take that Revolve base and unsuppress it, kind of bring that back to life, you can see the hole in there. It looks like it's a separate feature from everything else, but also, the hole fill is there. It's a separate feature. But it also looks like the hole's still in place too. So let's try that hole fill one more time. Let's go ahead and edit that feature, and we're going to re-click on that merge result. Now watch the difference here. Now it puts it together. Now you can definitely not see that hole in the center. So I'm going to show you how to put in the material in here, but first we're going to go ahead and take that material out. So let's right click up here to the top of our tree. If we go over here to our display manager, or display pane over here, we're going to right click on that blue dot which says blue glass. We're going to go ahead and remove all part appearances from the Revolved Boss Space wine glass -5 Revolved Boss Space hole fill feature and part. So this way we just get back to the regular gray model, and what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be doing a fillet, and we're going to be filleting 3 different faces on a full round fillet, which is really kind of handy. It's really going to be handy to do in a situation like this. So now we're going to go to fillet. We're going to go over here to not the first one, a constant size fillet, but the full round fillet. And what that does is allows us to select 3 different surfaces, and it's going to create a round between all 3 of those surfaces. So the first surface is going to be here on the outside, and then we can go over here and click on this surface. You notice that one's green. This one's going to be purple. So we're going to go ahead and click on that, and this next one's going to be pink. We can get to that pink one over here too, simply by doing the tab key over here in the feature manager. But you need to make sure that you click inside of that selection box in order to get that. So that's pink. Now you can see the preview of that. Go to the green check mark, because the sharp edge and the top of a wine glass along with a hole in the middle, you're not going to make a whole lot of friends with those things in there. So that's going to be our top fillet. So let's go ahead and rename that. And of course we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. You want your guest's fingers to get all cut up here with sharp glass. So we're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to go to fillet. It remembers what we did before. So we're going to go do something similar. We're going to go ahead and click on that top face, tab twice, allows us to click this face, so we can do all this within the modeling area, and that face, which is pink, gives us that preview of what we're going to get, and go to the green check mark. And now we're almost done. Okay, so let's tidy things up a little bit. Let's rotate our model and see if that looks right. I think there probably should be more of a gradual transition down here, so I'm going to go back, just for the fun of it. I'm going to go back to our original Revolved Boss space, and we're going to go ahead and edit that sketch in there. So right click on the sketch as we're going to make these edits. Now let's go ahead and change some of these dimensions. Let's make that maybe 90 degrees, kind of bring that up a little bit. Maybe this distance over here, let's make that maybe 0.35. Oop, that went the opposite direction, maybe 0.5 would do that. So now you can do that. You can make all these dimensions in here a little bit different. If you want to do that, maybe 3.8 up here. Maybe it's just bulging out there just a little bit too much. Let's go ahead and make that 3.5 and see what that does. Doesn't like that. It's going to go in a little bit too far, I think. So maybe 3.6, 3.7. So that does it pretty well. And maybe this dimension over here for 8 and almost 9 degrees, maybe we can make that 8 and see what that does. But just to demonstrate that you can make changes to your model relatively quickly, and once you do that, everything should rebuild. So that's a little bit different. It looks more like a chalice than wine glass. But let's go ahead and move on from this. Okay, so let's tidy things up a little bit before we move on. Let's take our fillet 2. Let's go ahead and make that our bottom fillet. Okay, so now we need to put our appearances back in. We still have glasses of material up here, but we got the bland white color up here. Let's go ahead, and it's probably opaque too, but let's go ahead and choose something a little bit different. Let's go over here to our task pane, over here on the right hand side. Remember that? That's an evaluation question. But if you go ahead and click on that, it gives you a couple, 3 different choices. You go to appearances, which would be applied to the chalice or the wine glass. You go to scenes, which applies to the background. You can put in decals in here too if you want to do that, maybe a company logo or something like that. But what SolidWorks allows you to do, and we're going to cover this later, allows you to take an image, JPEG image or a PNG image with transparency associated with it perhaps, and actually apply it to a surface. So we're going to look at two different things. We're going to go to Appearances. We're going to go to the Glass folder. We're going to make it a glossy glass, and now we can pick a different color in here. So maybe this time we'll choose maybe a green glass. What you do is you just drag that onto your item over here. Makes it all green, hopefully. Let's try that one more time. Drag that over here. And this time you get this little selection box. So you notice that the first one is going to be a face. We can actually apply that glass to a face as if it was glazed over like some sort of opaque material. You could do it to the Revolved Boss space. So we're kind of going down a hierarchy here. So now we go from a face to a feature to a body and ultimately to the part. So we can apply it to the whole part. Since we only have one feature, well, we actually have 2, 3, 4 features in this now. We could apply it to different features, like maybe some of the fillets in here. But we really want to apply it to the body. The body and the part itself are going to be the same. So let's go ahead and apply it to the top of the hierarchy here. And of course, this next one over here is you can actually distinguish different faces in this and different elements in that graphics area to choose to actually apply that material to, the material qualities to it. So we're going to actually apply it to the part itself. So we're going to apply it to everything. Okay, so now that we apply an appearance onto our glass over here, and we have a green color to it, and you can see the material over here, we just applied the appearance. We gave it that translucent look, the glossy look, and a color too. We could do the same thing to scenes. So if we go over here to Task Pane, right click on the appearance of scenes and decals, and this time we're going to choose scenes. We want to go into basic scenes, but there are other scenes here too, but this is just a real quick introduction to this. So we're going to go in and click on basic scenes. We're going to scroll down here, and typically SolidWorks starts you with a 3-point faded. So it's kind of a white background with kind of a shadowy band in the middle, which is okay. But let's get something that's a little bit more dramatic. Maybe this one, backdrop gray with overhead light. So with the overhead light, it's going to give us perhaps some nice shadowing. So we're going to drag that into place, and now it should be ready to go. Not very dramatic here in SolidWorks, just make the background a little bit grayer, but in PhotoView 360 it's a little bit more dramatic. So I think we have a camera in here, but let me show you how to get a camera into your model. So if we go over here to the Display Manager, and again we're going to be doing this real quick, we already have a camera 1 in here. It's not really activated. If you were to right click on that and go down here to Camera View and make that open, or kind of a gray checkbox that you see above, then you can actually choose that. But let's go ahead and make a camera. So if you right click on camera, you can go to add a camera. What it does is it splits your screen up. This is what it looks like from the aperture of the camera, and this is SolidWorks over here. And typically what you do is you orient it. What I do is I orient it over here in the camera view, and then I do some fine tuning over here. But this shows you the camera, and then you can move that red dot around to try to position where the glass is going to be. You can take the camera and maybe move it a little bit closer to the wine glass, but sometimes it's easier just to do that over here. So when you go to the camera view, you have some scroll functions with the middle mouse button. You could orient that the way you like it. And let's say you want to move the camera over a little bit. Sometimes you can do a lot of the fine tuning over here in the SolidWorks view. So once you have that in place, go to the green check mark. Now we have a camera 2. If you were to right click on camera 2, that's selected. It's got the check mark next to it. And now we're ready for PhotoView 360. To get that though, it should be an item up here in your menu bar. We're going to go to Tools, go down here to Add-ins, click on PhotoView 360. It only takes a few moments to load up. And when it appears up here, now you can do your PhotoView 360. So we don't want to have this render region up here. So let's see if we can get rid of that. So last time I did this, I did render region. We don't want to do render region, so we're going to unclick that and go up here to final render. So you're not going to have that render region. I just chose that before. So now we're going to just do rendering. So if you remember before the introductory video portion of this, it does the the preview window, which doesn't show much. But if you go to the final render in the background, what it's doing is it's rendering that up to a certain level, and it goes up in here and it begins to render the model. You can see all 8 cores working on the computer. It does it works a lot harder on the model that we created. In the background, it doesn't work as hard, so it goes pretty quick in the background. And when it's all done, you're ready to go. If you want to save your image, just click on that image, right click on it. Actually, just click on it and just tell it to save it. and go over here to the button over here. You might wait a few minutes and then just put in a location of your choosing and rename it as you see fit, and then you're done with that. So if we were to get out of the final render, now you can see what the preview window looks like. If we can take that preview window and kind of put it off to the side and go back to our model, if we were to get out of that camera view, now we can make modifications in SolidWorks. So now the preview window kind of shows us what it's going to look like. So every time we make a modification over here and turn out a little bit, maybe rotate that a little bit, starts with something that's highly pixelated, and it gets finer and finer the more time that passes. So that's a real quick introduction to PhotoView 360, as well as an introduction to the Revolved Boss Space feature. So the basic wine glass over here that we made modifications to, that we initiated with, we did a thin feature with that Revolved Boss Space, and then that center portion to fill in the hole in here, we just use the regular Revolved Boss Space to do that. Okay, so before we move on, let's talk a little bit more about our display manager up here. These are all of our managers, including the feature manager, properties manager, configuration manager, but our display manager is up here. And in that, we've talked just briefly about appearances. We didn't talk at all about decals. Then we have our camera, where we have the scene lights camera. We can actually do a walkthrough, but we're going to save that for a much bigger project and a different video too. Let's go ahead and start over here on the left and talk a little bit more about some of these details. So over here, if we click on that, we can see that we have our green glass. And we could also see that over here in our task pane over here on the right hand side. We chose the green glass in here, but we could actually choose other things in here too. But if we go to glass up here, we could do just regular gloss glass, which gives us a color choice. But texture glass too in here, we could actually choose that too. We don't have any color choices here, but if we did like maybe sandblasted glass or maybe frosted glass, we could do that too and actually apply that over here. And it's going to go grow up. Nope. You have to be careful about this. When you do drag it in here, just like before, you need to make sure you wait for this dialog box to pop up. So we could do face revolve. We could just do that face again. We talked about that briefly. We could do that one feature. We could do the face, the feature. We could do the body, and the Revolved Boss Space part itself. Could be chosen here, and I think it would be equivalent. So the body is all one thing in here. And we can do a filter in here too, as we talked about that before. But let's go ahead and apply that towards the whole object here, towards the whole part. So now we lost our color in here. So if we go back over here, we could actually take that glass, and even though it's frosted glass and kind of white, we could actually change that. So if we right click on that, we could add appearance if we want to do that. It gives us kind of the choices that we had before, but we're going to go exit out of that. We can right click on that. We can edit the appearance. Kind of the same dialog box in here too. So again, we can go back in here, right click on that. We can copy the appearance, remove the appearance, add to selection. If we copy the appearance, we could actually take that appearance and apply it to something else, or another part perhaps, or some different sections of this part that we might have in here too, like perhaps a different feature or a different body in there. We can do that too. And then we have some other options in here too, but what we really want to do is we want to edit the appearance. And what we really want to do is we want to add a different color to it. So now we're going to go ahead and choose, instead of that white color, we're going to go down here, we're going to choose like maybe an aquamarine color. If we don't really like that color selection in here, we could actually go down here and maybe move this target around until we get a color that we really kind of like. So we're going to make that a little bit kind of a light purple in there. And then we have our map in here too. So this would apply like textures to our model. We're not going to get into advanced features. We're going to go ahead and play around with that a little bit later in a different video. But basically what I want to show you is how to select different colors in here. And if you want to get really detailed on the colors, now you can change the red, blue, green values that we have in here and make those a little bit different. A lot different. If you had something specific you wanted to add there, you could do that too. So yeah, let's see what we can do about erasing that. And up. It's not going to let us do it. Oh, I don't have my cap locks on. Alright, let's try that. Or my number locks. Darn. Why is this so hard? 160. I just want to move it by 1 unit. So that's how you would do that. So if you had something very specific in here you wanted to type in, you could do that too. And you could also change it from red, blue, green to HSV if you want to do that too. Okay, enough said there. We're going to cover a lot of these more advanced features later. So if we go to the green check mark, now we have our frosted glass texture that we chose over here in a task pane. And we also have a different color in here too that we could use for photoreal rendering. Okay, so we talked about appearances over here as a sub-tab underneath our display manager, but let's go to this other tab over here too. This is called View Decals. We haven't even talked about that, but decals allow you to take an image that you might have and it'll help wrap it around a face that you might have in your object. So it gives you the capacity to add like maybe a logo or maybe some other information, like maybe some warning symbols or other things, text even, on your part that might appear actually on a part as a decal, as a banner or a boilerplate or something like that. So let's go ahead and do this. It doesn't really start you out with a whole lot. You have your yellow memo up here, which implies you need to do something out here in the modeling area. So we can go to the, it also says you can go to the Appearance tab of the task pane under the decal node, drag the decal from the library to the model face in the graphics area. So, well, we could do that. But we could also click down over here to open Decal Library. So we could do that. We can go over here and click on this one. We can click on this over here. But either way, we got to march across the field. We're going to get over here to our task pane. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at our decals. So it starts with the folder up here with decals in. There's a subfolder somewhere in the SolidWorks directory, which gives us some logos too. So here's a bunch of logos in here. And then under the decal folder is the main one. And these are just basic stuff. And one thing to note over here is some of these are PNG files, which means they have transparency to them. So if you see any of these decals in here with a kind of a checkerboard background, which means there's going to be something transparent about them. And we could actually take PNG files and make those ourselves and define that background too to make sure that that background is going to be transparent. But essentially, we could just take a decal out of here if we're satisfied with what we have in here and drag it onto a face of our part and it'll be there. You know, very simply, it's done there. But there's some additional modifications and options in here too you should probably know about. First of all, you could actually create a folder in here. So we have our decal folder up here, which is the main SolidWorks folder with some stock items in there. And it's got a subfolder in here. It's actually a folder location. You can actually have a location for all your decals. If you want to make these, you can make them within SolidWorks and then have those available next time when you're putting together another part or an assembly. You can have those available then too. So let's just do the basics. Let's go ahead and drag this thing in here, and you don't want to do it in the background. You actually want to select a face on your part. So this I put on the inside of the wine glass. I would put on the outside. You can see what it's being selected. And if you drop it into place, then you have something that looks like that. So you have these editing functions in here. You have this box in here which allows you to scale it. Not to stretch it, but to scale it. Then you have this orange or yellow circle in here. If you click on that, it means it's selected. It's got that cyan color. We could actually spin that thing around a little bit and scale that down, scale it up. We could actually move that up too. So we can take that and move that up a little bit if we want to put that in a position, a little bit different position than what's in there before. If you can't really select these edges because it's too close to that circle, just scoot in a little bit and allow you to do that. So once you get that decal in place, you like the way it looks. I don't like the way it looks, but just to close this thing out, we're going to go to the green check mark, and bang, there's our decal. Now you might, if your decal disappears here, you might consider going up here to your hide show items and make sure this guy is selected. If that's not selected, view decals, you're not going to see the decal. It's just going to disappear on you. So make sure you have that selected. So there's our first decal. And now we have over here, when we click on our decals, our decal sub-tab in here, now we have a folder in here with our decal in it. So this is going to be the folder with all the decals. We're going to add a second one in here. And we can make modifications to that. We can modify the face if we want to do that. Maybe select a different face down here, or maybe on the inside of the glass, which wouldn't be very practical and hard to apply. Or we can make other modifications too and get that dialog box back open if we were to go to edit decal. But for now, let's go ahead and hide that decal. Let's go ahead and add another one. So if we want to add another decal, now we don't have the ability to open the library. We could actually open the library over here in a task pane and do that. Or because now we have something in here, and let's go ahead and take an image that we might have and actually put that on our glass. Let's go ahead and right click on decals and do this. We're going to add a decal. Takes us right back to the properties manager, opens that thing up. There's our yellow memo. We can read stuff in there to see what we might need to do in order to satisfy this. It's looking for something in the graphics area. But let's go ahead and add an image in this. So if we go to browse, I'm going to go ahead and go to my design folder or my programs folder and go into my temporary folder. And we're going to go into the 23 folder in here, and what I want to do is get my Pancake Chef transparent decal, and we're going to go ahead and select that. So double click or go to open in that dialog box, and there it is. And now we're going to go ahead and apply that. So it doesn't really say that we need to go over here and select something. Intuitively, if you just go to the green check mark, it should put it somewhere, but it doesn't. It just closes it out, forgets about you and all that work you just did. But yeah, let's just go out here and select a face. So we're going to go ahead and select a face in here and put it in there, and kind of black and not as attractive as it could be. And of course, a pancake house, if you know where they're at down in SeaTac, kind of a fun place to go if you're flying out of town or you live down in the Burien area, SeaTac area. But what we want to do, they don't typically serve wine for breakfast, but along with pancakes, your side of a link sausage and the maple syrup, you might want to ask for a glass of wine. And this might be kind of a thing that you might have the Pancake House logo on that glass of wine. Maybe you take it with you on the plane as a souvenir too. I don't know if they'd miss it or not, but probably would eventually. But there's a couple choices in here. This is a transparent image, as we saw over here in our library. There's some transparent images over there too. But we can actually, there's a couple different choices. Right now it's black, which means it's got the night sky in the background in here. It says no mask. Or we could do image mask file. We don't really have that file. That's just like another PNG file that would actually kind of mask that out and take some of the portions out of that. Or we can select the color mask. We could do that too, and actually go in here and actually, if we go onto that thing and maybe click in the square over here, we can take that selection tool in here and actually select out some of the items that might want to mask in the background. And if we do that, it should be able to generate that. So now it's going to take all that black in the background that we actually have masked, and it's going to take that out. May not take it out all of it out, but if you actually set this up as a PNG file, where you can use the image alpha channel, which we created with that PNG file. When we do that, that really does take it out. So there's 4 different choices here. You can go from no mask, and then these other 3 options are have a mask option in there. If that background were like completely black or white or blue, whatever it might be, then we could actually select that. But if it's a mottled color, if it's got different shades of black or gray in the background, it's going to be hard to do that one. And if you had a selective color mask that went in the background of that, you could actually select that too. So we're going to go ahead and select that, and that actually looks pretty good to me. We're going to go ahead and scale that up or down if you like. We're not going to rotate it. And if you like the way that looks, go to the green check mark. Now we have our Pancake Chef wine glass that we can take with us as a souvenir. Oh, one more thing before we leave decals here. Let's say we want to go ahead and create a decal itself. The image is not really the decal, but we can create a P2D file, which will help us define that a little bit better. So let's go back to our decal over here, and let's right-click on it. Let's go back to edit that decal. We can actually save that. So here's our decal over here, decal preview. Doesn't really show much, but here we can say the decal, and when we do that, it'll save it as a P2D file, and we can put that in our folder over here, which is my 23 Revolved Boss space video folder. And if I go to save, it's going to put that in here. So it says this the folder, huge long name in here, where you could have chosen to save this decal is not currently visible in the decals folder of the task pane. Do you wish to make this folder visible? So I could have really put it in the SolidWorks folder if I knew really where it was. I mean, it was buried like maybe 5 or 6 layers deep. But I'm going to say yes over here, and what that does, if we open up our task pane where the decals are, now we have that folder in here, which is our 23 Revolved Boss space full around fillet, wine glass, so on and so forth. It's going to be in that folder here. So Here's our main decal folder, part of SolidWorks. There's our logos folder, and now we have our pancake chef folder. And we get, quite literally next time if you want to do this, if you want to take that decal, just drag it in there and make it like really huge so it wraps around the wine glass. We could do that too. So there it goes. There's our new decal. And I was actually thinking that we're going to redefine the decal that we had in there. So let's go ahead and do that. Make that nice. Make it a really nice souvenir glass that we would be proud to give away. So go to the green check mark. And now we're ready to move on. Okay, so now that we have our appearance on this and our sub-tabs over here in our display manager, we have our decal in here. Let's jump to scenes again and talk a little bit more about scenes. Then we'll talk a little bit more about SolidWorks lighting. So you notice over here on lighting we actually have some of the directional lights off, which is probably what we don't want. So let's do this. Let's migrate over here to the task pane. Let's go ahead and open this up and let's go ahead and take a look at some scenes. So we have a bunch of scenes. We have basic scenes, like I said before, SolidWorks basic scenes, 3-point faded. And we use some other scenes in here too with different lights and different backgrounds. This is always a good one, backdrop gray with overhead light. That renders out pretty well. But there's other scenes in here too. We have studio scenes, which has different backgrounds to it. We can kind of give it a checkered background over here. So if we were to go ahead and render this, it would have a little bit of that checkered background too. We could actually turn on and off lights to enhance that. Then there's presentation scenes. So we have they put a lot more stuff into this. So here's some presentation scenes like right off the bat. And these are all the folders that are associated with it too, like landscape 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and so on and so forth. Looks like 3 is missing there, but check this out. If we did courtyard and drag that in here, these scenes at the very top of the menu over here, you have the capacity to actually move around and move your object around as your object spins around. So does this scene too. You can actually look up at the sky, top of the sky, you look down at the bottom. It almost has a 360-degree view in all directions too. So that's kind of nice, but there's only a few of those scenes in here. And if you were to open this up and take a look at some of those other ones too, we have a kitchen scene, courtyard, factory background, office space background. Office space is not very attractive. It's kind of dark and there's not a whole lot of light and detail in there. But kitchen's okay. I mean, you need to get more of these in here, and these sort of backgrounds are downloadable too. So we can take kitchen, put that in the background, and put our wine glass in here. Might be more appropriate in the kitchen, but it depends. It depends what you guys do at work. Who knows? This could be our background in here too. But let's take a look at this. Some more scenes. We have some landscape scenes in here. We can take a kind of like an early, maybe a late spring scene or early fall scene in here. Put our wine glass in here. Take your souvenir glass wherever you want to go. Take that out in the woods if you like to do that, as long as you bring a bottle of wine with it. We can go into other scenes in here too. So here's a bunch of landscape scenes in here. Sometimes it's the same scene, but it's got different aspect ratios to it. So it depends what you might want to do here. Then we have other landscapes. Here's our landscape 2. We'll drop that into place. Essentially here, all you have to do is just drag and drop. Pick the scene that you like. Problem with these scenes is you can't rotate them. You can rotate the model, but you can't really rotate the scene. So the scene is static. And once you get a scene in place, then you want to add your camera. But let's do this. Let's go back up to the kitchen scene because that's a little bit more complicated. And let's go ahead and go through some options in regard to that. So go right up to the presentation scene, top of the folder up here, and then we have our 4 scenes that we could choose from. Let's go ahead and drag in kitchen and kind of play around with that a little bit too. So, if we zoom in on the model a little bit too close, it makes it look like it's a 10-gallon wine glass here. If we zoom out too far, it kind of makes it look like it's a liqueur glass. So we want to get somewhere in between. Of course, when we do this, we want to make sure that we do this with a camera view. So we're going to cover that here in just a moment. So our scene selected here, and if you were to take your middle mouse button and kind of rotate that around, you'll notice that the scene rotates with the glass. So even though you might want to have it like over here in this corner, sometimes it's not going to cooperate on you. You're going to have to zoom in and out with the middle mouse button, scrolling on that. But if you right click on the mouse, there's some additional options in here too. You can do zoom to fit, kind of get it in there, and that works out sometimes. Zoom the area, if you want to zoom it like right to the area of the glass. Now the glass is growing, getting kind of big here. So it's like maybe a pint sized glass. We could do zoom in and out, so now with our middle mouse button we could zoom in and out and get that position the way we like it. If it's not quite the way you like it, then there's some other options in here too. We can rotate the view, again with the left mouse button here or the middle mouse button depressed. We can rotate the view, it does the same thing. And Pane is actually a pretty good one too, so we could actually move that back and forth. Once we get that into position that we like prior to the camera view, Pane might be helpful there. Right click one more time, we can roll view, which means we can actually tilt that a little bit if you want to do that. We're going to go ahead and reset that a little bit later. But the best thing to do right here, we'll do escape and kind of get out of that. Let's go ahead and focus on just the glass itself and try to get that in an orientation that we like maybe a little bit above the table. We want to make sure that the logo is showing, and we're not going to worry about what's going to be going on in the background. We're going to go ahead and rotate the background independently here in just a moment. Okay, so we're going to rotate that, get that close to where we want it. Again, we want to make sure that they're a little bit above the glass. We see the logo, so the logo isn't hiding. And once we do that, now we can go over here on our scene and actually make some modifications to our scene. So let's go ahead and right click on that. Let's go to, instead of background environment, we're going to go to environment and kitchen. We're going to right click on that, and now we're going to edit the scene. So now we have a couple of different options up here. We're not going to go through all these. We're going to save some of these for a different video. But for the background, we're going to use environment, or we can use different things. So we can actually add an image here if we want to do that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to choose environment, which is going to be the kitchen. That's a nice environment. And we're going to go ahead and stick with that. So this is where it actually comes from. So floor. We don't want to do floor reflections. I'm not certain how that's going to look, but essentially that countertop is the floor of the image, so we can actually adjust that. Now we could actually move this up or down beyond the floor too if you want to do that. If you want that little circle in here, if we want to go ahead and choose that, we can do that. We can make the floor go down, or we can make it go up. If we make it go way down and actually try to rotate that, then you can see that the floor is actually, kind of below that. If you really make it deep, like maybe 36 inches or something like that, then when we rotate it, if you go to the green check mark and try to rotate it, then actually does something different. It doesn't really show up when you rotate it, but when you try to render it, sometimes that floor, this object will either be floating above or below that floor, so you do have to be careful about that. So let's right click on that. Let's go back to edit scene. Let's go ahead and reset this back to 0. If you want to go off in the other direction, you can do that too. You can bring this up rather than down. Take that arrow and bring that up. And again, if you go to the green check mark and try to rotate that, and then it rotates, looks like it might be rotating in a different position. But anyways, when you finally get to the rendering of that, that's when that floor actually makes a difference. So we're going to set that back to 0. So let's go back and edit our scene. Right click on this. Let's go ahead and edit scene, and let's go to that floor and just set that to 0 again. We could actually rotate this around too, so we can actually take that and rotate it a little bit. So now the scene is going to rotate, so this is where we want to be able to do that. We want to rotate that scene, so if we want to put the wine glass maybe on this edge over here, we can do that. I kind of like the fruit bowl over here, so we can probably move it just to the left of the fruit bowl if we want to do that. And we can physically go over here to our Properties Manager and make those changes over here too. So let's go back to our Properties Manager and see what that does if we were to rotate this. So it gives a value right next to the cursor, but it's going to be under here under Advanced Options over here, and we could actually take that. So right now it's about 320. So let's go ahead and rotate that back a little bit and get that scene back where we wanted it, kind of like by that fruit bowl. And if we like it over here, we can continue doing that. If we go to the green check mark, we can right click over here and go to Pane and actually move that back into place. That's another way of doing that. So that's a way to rotate the scene. In the next section of this video, we're going to go ahead and play around with some camera view options. Okay, so now we have this in a location that we like, a position that we like. We can probably make additional modifications by the camera view. Because if you want to do your PhotoView 360 by way of a camera, you can control what's actually inside that frame. So let's go ahead and right click on camera. Let's go ahead and add camera. And you're not going to get exactly what you like, and you can see that when you try to zoom in and zoom out on that wine glass, that the scene doesn't zoom in or zoom out either, so that could be a little frustrating. But we can go on this side over here. As you know, this is where the camera is. We could actually make modifications to how the camera looks. We could zoom out a little bit. We can right click over here to where what it looks like inside the camera. Do zoom, pan, rotate. We can actually zoom to area, zoom in and out. We could pan. So if we want to move that maybe over here, we could do that. Then we could actually zoom in a little bit. It might be a little bit easier to do that over here with the camera. So we can go here in the camera side and actually make modifications there. So escape once gets us out of that pan view. And then we can move this around, take that red dot, move that around, and kind of get that centered so it actually looks kind of good. So we're going to zoom this, we're going to take that down and take that little rectangle that defines that magenta and blue rectangle that defines the field of view, and get that so this kind of fills up the area. Some other modifications, you might see that it's kind of angled a little bit. We could take that angle value and maybe make that 0, kind of straighten it out a little bit, and that should be a pretty good render when we get that done. So it takes a little bit of a manipulation to get this just right. But one last thing you want to do down here is you want to get the proper aspect ratio before we actually finish this. Probably should have done that first. But what we want to do is we want to get the 16:9 HD TV format. Wow. So it's not the 4K TV, but this one is HD. But that's that format that we want. We want about 800 by 450. So all you have to do is scale this down to about half of that if you want afterwards, or just leave it at 16:9. And that'll be fine. But this is important. Make sure you get that aspect ratio. When you're all done with that, our camera view, go to the green check mark. Now we have it there. So there's our camera view. You notice the camera view because it's kind of chopped off over here, and it's difficult to make edits in SolidWorks when you have it there. And we can take our camera 4 and we can rename that. Just like everything else, we can call that kitchen and maybe -1. Okay, so I think we're almost ready to go. Again, if we just go back and review this a little bit, our display manager tab over here and our sub tabs over here for appearance, for decals, for camera view, lights and everything, we're almost ready to go. The last thing we have to do is we have to turn on our lights. We haven't done that. It's not going to look as good if we don't turn our lights on. And typically in PhotoView 360, the lights are off. And sometimes in your SolidWorks files they're off too. So our directional light, or directional light number 1 and 2, those are on in SolidWorks but not in PhotoView 360. So we want to turn these on. Right click on in PhotoView 360. You're probably not going to see a change in here, but you will see a change if you turn these off in SolidWorks. But let's say we want to add more lights in here. So let's do this. Let's get out of our kitchen number 1 over here. Right click on that camera view. Let's go ahead and get out of that camera view right now. Let's actually add some lights. So we're going to go to SolidWorks Lights. We're going to right click in here. We're going to add some more lights. We can show our lights in here. We can edit all of our lights. If we zoom out a little bit and take a look at what our lights are doing here, you can see what they're doing. So this light over here, we could actually move that around. It's actually right in front. That's actually locked onto the model over here. And this light over here is not locked to the model, so we can't really, well, that looks like it's locked to the model too, actually. No. It's kind of on the model, but it looks like it's always going to be in the front, no matter how we orient that model. So we're going to go ahead and keep that the way it is. But we could add more lights in here, and we could add different colors to those lights too. So I'm just going to demonstrate one light, but we have a choice between a spotlight. We can actually shine on one certain aspect of our part. If we want to do that, we could add a point like a light in the middle of a lamp. If we want to do that, or if you think about a single light bulb hanging down from a ceiling inside of a closet where it kind of lights up everything that's around it, that's a good one to do. We could add sunlight too if you're doing something outside. That's a whole different animal over here. I'm going to cover that in a different video too. But we could actually add a directional light too. So we have 2 items of directional light in here, but let's go ahead and add a spotlight. And we're going to just start with the default settings over here, and there's a spotlight. So we can take that spotlight and kind of move that around a little bit. Best thing to do here is like go to the front view. Okay, so I'm running the video, kind of low on resources, but it's never hurt me before. What I like to do is kind of go to the front view and take a look at what it's going to look like. So This is actually the front view of this, but this light is actually coming from the right view, so we're going to get the way that looks in the right view. The way it looks in the top view, we can take this green circle and reduce that down and maybe make the focus right here at the base. So that's where that red dot is. We're going to make that the focus down here in the base and maybe widen that out a little bit and see what that looks like. Then if you're satisfied with the way that looks, what I do is I go to the front view, the right view if you want to do that, and then the top view, just make sure you have that in the right location. The best thing to do is just do the spacebar and go to each one of those views and get that in the position that you like. So again, we could do the right view over here and put that over here. We're actually looking right at it. And maybe the top view here, just make sure we still have it out front and we like it. Put it in the location, you can do that. If you want to change the color, you can do that over here too. And a lot of other options in here too. You just kind of have to go back and forth between rendering it and changing the light color in here and some of these other aspects to get this just right. So I'm going to do green. That might actually show up pretty good, or maybe yellow or orange might be a good one. Let's go ahead and actually let's do red. We'll do red on that light, so you can kind of get a preview of what that might look like. But its focus is going to be down here. So basic, a lot of the default settings, we're going to go to the green check mark, and we're going to make sure that spotlight is on over here in PhotoView 360. So on in PhotoView 360, go down here to our camera kitchen number 1. Let's go ahead and do the camera view on that. Put us back to where we were before. And now let's go ahead and render this thing. Okay, so it looks like we have everything in place. We have our lights, we have our decal, we have our scene in the background, and now and we also have our some of our display qualities in here too. Our view appearances, including the frosted glass and the colored glass. And we actually have a light, a color under our light. So I think we've fussed enough with this. Let's go ahead and do PhotoView 360. But I'm going to start with the preview window. If we go ahead and get that thing up and running, it's going to go ahead and give us kind of a pixelated view, a preview of what we might be getting. And if we like that, then we can go through the hoops of getting everything else going. So this doesn't really show us everything, but now you can see with the preview that we do have lights on it now. I think before when we did a preview on this, lights weren't really on, and that actually looks like it's going to turn out pretty well. So with that, let's go ahead and take that aside. Let's go to PhotoView 360, and let's go ahead and do a final render. So this might take a while, but at first, it begins to pixelate the screen, and with our kind of our smaller aspect ratio than what we had before, it's going to go ahead and render this actually pretty quick. So it's pretty quick in the scene in the background. It's nothing but an image, but the 3D model that we have in the foreground is going to take a little bit more time to render. So yeah, that looks like a really nice souvenir glass. So when we're done with that, if you like the image, you can go ahead over here and save the image. If you want to add some additional elements in here, let's say it's a little bit too dark, a little bit too light, you want to make some modifications. You don't necessarily have to re-render this. You can do all sorts of modifications in here, but study these on your own. But some of the ones I play around with a lot are input black level. Right now it's set to 0, but if I were to type in like maybe 0.1, something really small, it actually gets dark pretty quick. So I don't think you can go to like a negative value, -1. I don't think it'll do that. It'll just reset back to 0. But a complement to that is input white level. Right now it's set to 1, but you might want to do 1.2, perhaps. Gets a little bit dark. You can go less than 1, like maybe 0.8. It's going to brighten up a little bit. So there's a few options in there. Hue offset. Maybe 10 degrees. It's going to favor one side or the other. And you notice that when you do a hue offset, then we have a color wheel up here that begins to change too. So now you can actually make modifications to this color wheel up here. May not be completely responsive right away. It might take a few minutes to go ahead and rotate that around. But if you don't like the way it is, you can come down here to hue offset and actually set that back to 0, or maybe just make slight modifications on one side or the other. Of course, if you favor like yellows and reds over here, it kind of makes it look like the sun shining in the window or the sun setting. So there's some options over there too. Colorization, if we were to type in a larger value in here, like maybe 2% or 10%, kind of makes it look like there's fog coming in here. So I don't think it'll do a negative value, maybe negative 10. It's just still going to set it back to 0. Saturation, that's is where you can really bring out some of the colors. Right now it's at 100%, but if you were to do like 90%, kind of mutes out a little bit, kind of approaches like maybe grayscale, like a black and white photo. And if you go over 100%, maybe 150%, the colors become very vivid. So lots and lots and lots of options in here, and a lot of options within the options. And you can explore some of these too. But again, the premise here is once you get a PhotoView photoreal image generated here in PhotoView 360, you can still make, if you're not really quite satisfied with it, you might actually get something that's very satisfactory just by playing around with some of these numbers over here under the advanced settings. And when you're all done, save the image, put it in a location of your choosing. And if you do a lot of images in here, you're going to see a block of images down here. And you could always recall these images later and continue to make modifications to them. And if you like what you did in regard to your modifications over here with the advanced settings, you can go ahead and save it. So the last thing you want to do is go ahead and save the image, put it in a file location of your choosing, and then go ahead and send it to me. So that pretty much wraps it up here. So what we talked about in this latter part of the video is some of the display options that were available in here. We talked about some of the appearance settings with regard to putting on frosted glass and then coloring the glass. Then we put in a decal and all the settings associated with the decal. Then we finally ended up with scenes and lights until we got something. Once we put our render together, after looking at the preview window, we got something that we thought was pretty good. And there's a lot of options associated with that. Try to make it look as attractive as you can. And then send me that image when you're all done. And of course, you're going to be satisfied with the image too. You're going to go ahead and put that into your cover sheet of your drawing set.